Hello, and thank you for joining us here at Anti-Racism Movie Review. Today we're going to be discussing Arkangel, an episode of Black Mirror, which isn't technically a movie, but has a lot of important lessons when it comes to anti-racism. Before we get to the anti-racism aspect, I want to give a summary. And this episode is essentially about Marie and Sarah. So, Marie is a new single mom. We watched her give birth to Sarah via cesarean section in the initial scene of the episode. Shortly thereafter, there was a scene where Sarah's a toddler and Marie takes her to the park. When they're at the park, Marie loses track of her. Sarah's lost. Sarah's found. Sarah's found in particular by a black male. Now, we're going to come back to this, and this is going to be the crux of what we're going to be discussing from an anti-racism perspective. Nonetheless, Sarah is found. Marie is upset. Marie decides to employ Arkangel, which is an implant. There's an implant that goes into your child's brain. I know it sounds bad. Implant goes into your child's brain, and you can use a tablet as a parent to monitor your child. Not only can you monitor things like blood chemistry, like iron or cortisol, but you can actually see what your child sees. So, Marie, sign me up. Turns out that there's this other feature that's really special, which is you can filter. You can filter things that are going to cause your child to be upset. So, for example, Marie and Sarah pass a house that has a dog, and the dog barks, looks kind of mean. So what they can do is they can turn the filter on, and instead of seeing a barking dog, Sarah only sees a weird pixelated image that's sort of muffled. So Sarah has this Arkangel essentially watching over her from the time she's a toddler until Marie sees something that disturbs her. Sarah self-mutilates. She pokes her finger with the pencil and starts bleeding, puts some of the blood on her face. So again, Marie's upset, takes Sarah to a therapist. The therapist breaks it down to her, says, look, this Arkangel, it was always banned in Europe, and then pretty soon it's going to be banned in the United States. So the best thing you can do, I'm paraphrasing, the best thing you can do, get rid of it. Well, you can't take the chip out. You can't remove the implant, but you can disable all those filters and put it away. Which Marie actually does. Marie gets rid of the tablet. Until later on in the episode, Sarah tells Marie, yeah, I'm going to, just like teenagers do, yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hang out with one of my girlfriends, watch a movie. But in reality, she's going to see the boyfriend. For whatever reason, Marie decides to check up on Sarah. And she sees that night that Sarah isn't at her friend's house. She's not at her friend's house. She's actually somewhere else. So she turns on the visual component where she can see what Sarah's seeing, and she didn't want to see that. She saw it, but she didn't want to see it. Because as I mentioned, Sarah was with her boyfriend. So Sarah was with her boyfriend. So you can imagine what they were doing. So she saw Sarah, her daughter, having sex. got upset, and now she's continuously monitoring what Marie's continuously monitoring what Sarah's doing. So later on, there's a notification, a beep, and it says narcotic alert. So Marie picks up the tablet and scrolls through the history and is looking at what Sarah's looking at. Turns out Sarah snorts some coke that she got from her boyfriend, what looked like cocaine. So now Marie's livid, very upset, as you can imagine. She goes and hunts down the boyfriend and says, don't you ever, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but don't you ever talk to, text, speak to, stay away from my daughter, or I'm going to go to the cops. So he looks shook. He also looks petrified, upset. So he doesn't contact Sarah anymore. And as you can imagine, she's texting, calling him. He's not answering. So Sarah is devastated. As a matter of fact, she's walking down the street as she's realizing that he's not communicating with her. She met with him and he basically blew her off. So she looks like she's essentially dizzy, falls down to the ground. It looks like the emotions, it was so emotional that she fell, but there's something else going on. There's something else going on. Actually, there's another notification. We don't see what the notification says, but what ends up happening is Marie goes to a pharmacy, gets something out of the pharmacy. Next scene, you see Marie crushing something up and slip it in Sarah's morning smoothie. And then Sarah's at school. She gets nauseous. She throws up in the bathroom. She ends up in the nursing office. In the nursing office, the nurse comes in and says, well, we know why you were sick. It's because you were taking the emergency contraceptive pill. And Sarah's like, excuse me? What? I don't get it. And the nurse says, well, yeah, that's what happened. So Sarah goes home, starts rifling through the trash, sees the packet for emergency contraceptive pill. And all this time, the wheels are spinning, and you can see her getting more and more upset. She goes upstairs to her mom's room, finds the tablet. And see, the tablet was supposed to be turned off. Like, there was supposed to be no more Arkangel since Sarah was a preteen. So Sarah is, as you can imagine, upset. She confronts the mom. It's not pretty. Next thing you know, Sarah hits the road, and it does not look like Sarah is going to have a very positive future. That's the way the episode ends. It does not look like Sarah is going to have a very positive future. But that's basically what happened in the episode. And you say, well, okay, were these white people? Yeah, these were all white people. I mean, other than the black male who found Sarah, there were very, very few black characters. The episode was about 50 minutes long. If you count up the time that black people were on the screen, it adds up to about a minute. So a very small percentage of black representation. So you'd say, well, where's the anti-racism? How could there be racism? There weren't even black characters. Well, let's get into that. As I mentioned, we're going to discuss and spend some time with. We're going to hang out with the episode at around 5 minutes. So before or after this, if you want to stop, go back to watch 5 minutes and dig into it. You know, don't give it a cursory look. You know, look at it with some depth. So around 5 minutes is when Sarah is lost. They're at the park and Marie loses track of Sarah. Again, who finds Sarah? A black male. Let me ask you something. What percentage of black spending power in America, what percentage of black spending power in America goes to black businesses? Put this another way. The spending power in America, according to research, is about $1 trillion, a little over $1 trillion. Now, would you say that 50% of the dollars that black people spend go to black businesses? 40%? 20%? 10%? 5%? Estimates are that about 4 to 2% of black spending power goes to black businesses. Well, what does that mean? That means 96 to 98% of every dollar that black people spend do not go back to black people. Most of it goes to white people. How do you think that affects the mind of your average white person? Not that white people sit around and say, what percentage of black people spend their money with us? Or what percentage of black wealth is spent in our country? I mean, they don't think like, I don't think your average white person thinks that way. But if you're white, you know that you're going to stores and you're not seeing a whole lot of black people where you're spending your money. You also know if you go into black communities, a whole lot of the money that they're spending is in the hands of white people. So what does that mean for Marie? Well, that means there's a certain level of expectation. And I think this comes through in the film. The writer, producer, director do a really good job. Go back and look at 5 minutes. They do a really good job of showing the level of expectation that Marie has when it comes to black time, energy, resources. Because when Sarah is found by this black male, Marie runs up to Sarah, grabs Sarah, and starts saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. During this time, the black male attempted to speak to Marie twice. He basically said the same phrase twice, which is something like, she was following a cat. She was following a cat. Marie does not flinch. She doesn't acknowledge it, nothing. And more importantly, let's say you had a child. You lost your child. Someone found your child. What would be the first thing that you would do to that person who found your child? You would say thank you, right? There's no thank you. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, the episode goes kind of quickly, and this happens a lot in Black Mirror. So things happen quickly, so you don't necessarily catch these subtleties. But you would expect a white person or any person to say thank you. But Marie doesn't say thank you. And it gets back to this idea of I actually expect. I have an expectation that when I'm in distress or not in distress, that Black people are going to come to my aid and not have any expectation for even a thanks. This concept goes back to slavery, and we're going to talk about briefly, and we're going to talk about this more in other episodes, but we're briefly going to talk about Black people and technology. Black people as technology. See, when I think of technology, I don't necessarily think of it as gadgets, smartphones and HD TV and stuff like that. I think of technology as using science to create useful things or solve problems. So, a mirror is a technology, a wheel is a technology, as much as a laptop is a technology. And if your mind can travel with me for a minute to 1500s, 1600s, 1700s. You're thinking, hey, I got to get this cotton out of this ground down here in the southern United States. I got to get this cotton out of this ground. But I can't do it myself, so I'm going to employ science. I'm going to use science to help me create something useful. So I'm going to use science, or better yet, I'm going to use a black person to help me to create something useful, to solve my problem of how to get this cotton up out of the ground. So if you think about it, it's not that much of a stretch for a white person, your average white person, to view black people as a form of technology, as a way to extract resources, and do so without compensation. So back to Marie. When she runs up and grabs a child, it's sort of like when you turned on your phone or your tablet or your laptop to listen to YouTube. You didn't say, hey, thanks, YouTube. Thanks for allowing me to listen to this. You didn't say, thanks, laptop. Wow, that was cool. I appreciate that, laptop, for allowing me to use this. You just did it. And when it comes to white people in the black community at large, not all white people, but a lot of white people view black people as something to extract resources from and not necessarily have to compensate them. So I'm going to use you to find my child. And I don't have to compensate you. I don't even have to say thank you. And if you think this is a stretch, let's back up in the episode. Let's take a step back. The very first scene. It's a scene where Marie says, basically, I couldn't push. So she couldn't do a vaginal delivery. They had to do a cesarean section. They had a black OBGYN. Well, he was at least involved, whether or not he was the actual OBGYN. There was a black person involved in delivering the baby. That's kind of strange, isn't it? I mean, it's not necessarily strange to have a black OBGYN, but it is in a sense because there aren't that many black OBGYNs. I mean, relatively speaking, OBGYNs are dominated by, well, white people, but white females and to an extent, white males. So why have a black male as the OBGYN? Again, to extend this, if you want to think of it this way, to extend this concept of black male as technology. I couldn't push. I'm a white woman. I couldn't push. And so I need assistance. So I'm going to use a black person as technology to allow me to deliver my baby. And this isn't the only episode where there's this thought that the white person, think San Junipero if you've seen that episode, the white person says, you're supposed to help me. You're supposed to help me, to a black character. So this idea of black people as technology actually comes up in a lot of movies. And we're going to discuss these movies and this concept further. But just wanted to introduce you to the concept from an anti-racist movie review perspective. And I appreciate you joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Black Mirror, Arkangel. And when it comes to thoughts about what one can do to put anti-racism actually into action, because there's it's one thing to be aware, but what is it that you can do? Well, again, there's a conditioning. There's a conditioning for Black people to give your resources to non-Black people, white people in particular. And as a white person's perspective, there's an expectation that Black people are going to give their resources to you. So I think from there, you can piece together something that you can do. If even a shift in mindset of, as a white person, I should not expect this. Or as a Black person, I should not just voluntarily redistribute all of my resources to white people. Not to say that white people should be mistreated, but it's as if we as a society are conditioned to behave a certain way. And if we can start stepping out of that mold, then it'll do a great service to anti-racism. Thanks for listening to the show and have a wonderful day.